Then you might want to find details about the target's job, what role the person plays in the work organization, and what
kinds of internal and external resources that person would expect calls from.
If your goal is to get on site, then you need to know whether the target would meet with people and who those people would be. You have 4.48 billion potential websites to scrape through to look for data that can be helpful. So,
before you start digging in, it is important to plan your OSINT
engagement. To help you establish some parameters for what you're looking for, use the lists of questions in Table 2 to 1. Of course,
the questions in the table only touch the surface.
You can add other items about types of computers used, employee schedules, what languages are used, type of antivirus protection used, and much more. Here is a story ripped from the 2017 headlines. You can read one account of it at https://gizmodo.com/this-almost-certainly-james-comey-s-Twitter account-17938436441. It is centered on former director of the FBI James Comey. An internet blogger and researcher wanted to see if she could locate James Comey's social media accounts. Because Comey was the director of the FBI, it wasn't
public knowledge whether he had social media accounts,
let alone how to locate them. That is where this OSINT story starts. The full outline of the steps the blogger used to get to the bottom of the story is shown in Figure 2 to 1. Take a look, and then I'll walk you through it, step by step. First, the researcher had to establish what she wanted to uncover. Did Director Comey have social media accounts?
If so,
where were they? Researching this using only the internet proved to be very hard. In 2016, one website listed the top 60 social media platforms with that many platforms available, all with different rules and methods. It can be very hard to find one man. Fortunately, one of the oldest forms of OSINT proved to be in the researchers' favor. Listening. In one public appearance, Director Comey mentioned that he had Twitter and Instagram accounts. That statement helped the researcher narrow the search from more than
60 social media platforms to just 2.
2 is a much easier number to manage in a search. Do you see what I see? 19. After not finding any accounts directly linked to Director Comey, the
researcher located the Twitter account for Brian Comey,
the director's son. The researcher was able to confirm the connection of Brian Comey to Director
Comey when Brian congratulated Director Comey for his ascension to Director
of the FBI. One of the things a user can do is to link multiple social media accounts together. In this case, Brian had linked his Instagram account to his Twitter account. The researcher checked the Instagram account, but Brian had locked his account from Table 2 to 1 sample OSINT questions. Type of organization questions to ask. Corporation. How does the corporation use the internet? How does the corporation use social media? Does the corporation have policies in place for what its people can put on the internet? How many vendors does the corporation have?
What vendors does the corporation use?
How does the corporation accept payments? How does the corporation issue payments?
Does the corporation have call centers?
Where are headquarters, call centers, or other branches located? Does the corporation allow BYOD? Bring your own device. Is the corporation in one location or many locations? Is there an org chart available? Individual. What social media accounts does the person use? What hobbies does the person have? Where does the person vacation? What are the person's favorite restaurants? What is the family history, sicknesses, businesses, and so on of the person?
What is the person's level of education? What did the
person study? What is the person's job role?
Including whether people work
from home, for themselves, and who they report to. Are there any other sites that mention the person? Maybe they
Give speeches.
Post to forums, or are part of a club?
Does the person own a house? If yes, what are the property,
Taxes, liens, and so on? What are the names of the person's family members, as well as any of the previously mentioned info on those people? 20. Social engineering, the science of human hacking the public, so only those who had been granted permission to the account could
see what he posted.
The researcher decided to request to follow Brian. One of the features of Instagram is that while you wait for a user to accept your follow request, you're pointed to people in the same circle.
In case you also want to follow any of those people.
Instagram suggested a bunch of users who were Brian's family members, not including director Comey, and one account for Reinhold Niebuhr. If you do a few internet searches for Reinhold Niebuhr, you quickly learn that he was an American theologian and political commentator.
However, he died in 1971.
So, it's doubtful that he has an Instagram account.
But with a little more investigation,
the researcher learned that Comey wrote about Reinhold Niebuhr in his college thesis. Armed with this information, the researcher searched Twitter and found 7 accounts using that name. Out of all 7, there was one using that name publicly, with the handle at ProjectExile7. With a little more digging,
the researcher found that Project Exile was the name
of a program that Comey started when he was a U.S. attorney living in Richmond.
The researcher made her discoveries without accessing anything illegal,
without
hacking one single thing, and by looking only at open-source intelligence sources.
As she thought through the clues, this is an excellent example of blending both non-technical and technical OSINT.
And it's a good lesson for all social engineers. That's the basis of the rest
of this chapter, the different types of OSINT and how to utilize them as a social engineer. I've broken it down into 2 main sections: non-technical OSINT and technical OSINT. Mentions Twitter and Instagram accounts.
Observational
skills. Brian Comey led to Instagram. Google search. Twitter. Project Exile 7. Found Twitter confirmed congratulation of James Comey for promotion to FBI head.
Request to follow showed suggested accounts. Family
members and one called Reinhold Niebuhr. Comey wrote about Reinhold Niebuhr as thesis. 7 accounts using that name. Figure 2 to 1 amazing OSINT on a secure target. before we dive straight into the types of OSINT, I want to have a little sidebar with my thoughts on documentation. The question is not really whether to document or not. The real questions are what do you use to document and how much do you document? Think about what I said at the very start of the chapter. When you are searching through 10 yottabytes of data, you will find a lot of info on your targets. No matter how smart you are, unless you have a photographic memory, you won't be able to remember every detail, and even people with photographic memories cannot complete professional reporting by relying solely on their memories. Now, I can't really tell you exactly how you should document, because there are too many factors. For instance, when I started down this career path and it was just little old me doing all the work, I used advanced notepad applications that allowed me to make a new folder or note for each client. I would then break down that note into different sections like personal, business, family, social media, and so on. When I found a piece of OSINT, I would document it under the appropriate section, which made it easier to find that data as I was writing the report. I used little tricks like using certain colors for things I used on attacks. I used one color for moderate and another for critical finds. Then my team started to grow, and I had many people working on one project, which made me realize that passing notepads back and forth wasn't the best solution at all. I had to come up with a solution that allowed the team members to share notes. At first, I considered things like Google Drive. I considered cloud-based note applications and other cloud-based tools. Those solutions presented a few problems. I was being tasked with obtaining social security numbers, banking data, and other private and personal details on people's lives. What if the solution I used got hacked? That happened in 2013 when Evernote was breached. And more than 50 million passwords had to be changed. I couldn't control the way those solutions were accessed or how the data was managed. The word cloud often caused certain clients to shudder and say, no. Quote, that led me to start building out my own servers. We obtained space in a server hosting facility that was vetted and secure. We built our own secure VPN server and installed the software we had chosen on a server we owned that was behind firewalls, routers, and our VPN. This meant I controlled how the data was stored, managed, backed up, transmitted, and secured. This solution let me rest easy at night because I was confident in the way we managed our clients' data. Maybe you have a different solution. The important thing is that you take seriously how you store, manage, back up, transmit, and secure any data you collect on your clients. 22. Social engineering. The science of human hacking. Non-technical OSINT. I consider non-technical OSINT to be anything that does not involve direct interaction between the social engineer and a computer. You might shoulder surf as a target uses a computer, but you, the SE, are not the one using the computer. It is information you gather using non-technical means. There are a lot of specific methods I could go through here, but I can loosely define them all as observational skills, and in the following section, I give you some examples. Observational skills. Observational skills might seem like they're obvious and easy to use, but using them successfully is not a common skill, especially in the age of the fire hose of digital media. If anything, today's marketing tactics have trained us not pay attention to details. A 2015 study conducted by Emily Drago of Elon University, titled The Effect of Technology on Face-to-Face Communication, makes the point that the quality of face-to-face communications has declined due to technology. 62% of individuals observed for the study used a mobile device while in conversation with others, despite knowing it would decrease the quality of that communication. Note: to read the full text of the effective technology on face-to-face communication, visit
www.elon.edu/docs/e-web/academics/communications/
research/volume 601/show to drag away spring 15.pdf.
We are in a society that largely conveys messages of 280 characters and emojis.
Communicating through memes or social media posts. The advances that make
these things possible are amazing,
but they have created a situation in which people are less observant of those they are communicating with. It's also the reason that observational skills are at the top of my list in non-technical OSINT. You might be asking a few questions, such as these. What does the term observational skills encompass? What can you do to teach yourself these skills? What should you expect to reap? Let's discuss each of these questions and see what you can observe and learn. See what I did there? Do you see what I see? 23. What do observational skills encompass? The following scenarios give you some examples of how observational skills can be
used in the real world.
Scenario 1. Your task is to gain entry to the mailroom of a large healthcare facility. You must do it in broad daylight. You can't pick locks, climb walls, or jump through windows. You're testing the front desk and security staff to see if they'll allow you into the secured area, so you must go through the part of the healthcare facility where those staff members work. Here are just a few things you should have in your OSINT arsenal of observational skills. Clothing. This simple but sometimes overlooked piece of knowledge is important. In Chapter 1,
a look into the new world of professional
social engineering, I say the goal of the social engineer is to get you to decide without thinking. If you are breaking into a place where everyone dresses casually, and you're dressed in a three-piece suit, you're going to make people take notice of you. The reverse is also true. So you want to know how employees dress so that you can dress that way. 2. Entries and exits. Before you enter the building, understand where your egress points are. Is there a door where the smokers hang out? Is one entrance more heavily guarded than another?
Are there shift changes
that leave a certain post unmanned or less manned?
Requirements for entry.
What is required to gain entry to the facility or area?
Do you see employees with badges?
What kind of badges? Where do they wear them? Do they have to also know a code? Do visitors get escorts? Do visitors get badges? Is there a man trap, turnstile,
security desk,
or other security set up when you walk in?
Perimeter security.
Check out what's happening outside the building. Are there security cameras? Are there guards roaming the grounds? Are the dumpsters locked up? Are there any alarms or motion-triggered defense systems? Security staff, are they busy looking at their mobile devices or a computer screen? Or are they alert and paying attention? Do they look bored, beyond belief, or interested? 24. Social engineering. The science of human hacking. Lobby setup.
Are keypads or security devices set up where you can
shoulder search for passwords? In other words,
can you get close enough
to peek over someone's shoulder and capture the password as it is being typed? Of course, there can be many more things you will want to observe, but those are some of the basics to help you understand why these criteria are so important. Here's a true story
that involves clothing.
Entries and exits. Requirements for entry and perimeter security. Michelle, who's the tech editor on this book, and I were tasked with the very scenario I outlined at the beginning of this subsection. We had to do a fair amount of technical OSINT, which I get into later in this chapter. But there was also a fair amount of non-technical OSINT that led to our success. We decided to use the pretext of a pest control company that was hired to quote at an emergency spider spring. We called our company Big Blue Pest Control, and came with full big blue outfits and spray bottles of custom blue poison to kill any spiders we saw during the quoting process. This poison was actually just some blue Gatorade in a spray bottle. Fun fact, blue Gatorade disguised as poison is a great way to carry a replenishing and refreshing drink that can be used to quench your thirst when you're nervous about
breaking into a building and sweating profusely. However,
if you are taking gulps from your poison sprayer in the elevator when someone comes in, you might get weird looks. We started by driving around the perimeter and noticing entrances, exits, camera locations,
hangouts for the smokers,
and entrances that seemed the most crowded versus least crowded. We also took note of whether the employees coming in and out had badges and how they were dressed. We then picked our initial ingress point and started to do a slow walk toward the door.
The reason for the
slow walk was to observe what we could of how people were being let in. We saw 2 security guards overseeing people as they pressed their badges against a metal stand and were allowed in. There was also a security desk to the right that had someone manning a sign-in sheet. We decided to try to walk right past the guards and follow the crowd in. That did not work at all. We were stopped by a security guard who asked us what we were doing and why we were there. I looked down at his name badge and saw his name.
And then I started to say,
"Well, Andrew, we were asked to come and give a proposal for some emergency spider spraying." The guard stopped me mid-sentence by saying, "Okay, go sign." Two. I thought. But as we approached the desk, the man there asked for our names. As we gave our fake names, he scoured a list. When he didn't find us on the list, he said, "Sorry, you are not on our visitor list for today. You cannot come in without authorization." We tried to explain, influence, and even use pressure and a plea for help. Nada. Shut down. We exited the front door, walked around as we discussed what we would do, and saw a few smokers outside taking a break.
I told Michelle to follow
me, and we walked toward the smokers, acting as if we belonged and were inspecting the outside of the building. I pretended to take notes on my clipboard. We again did a slow walk, until we saw a few people moving toward the door, so we tailgated right in behind them. Now in the building, we followed this mass of people, and I quickly noticed we were heading straight toward the front where the security guards who just rejected us were located. I saw an elevator to my right, but there were no buttons. Darn, I thought to myself. An elevator that is called by security. Just as I finished my thought, an elevator door opened, and I immediately stepped inside, hoping that Michelle would observe and follow my lead. Fortunately for me, Michelle is pretty amazing at this type of thing and was not lost or overstressed. There was a group of people in the elevator, and Michelle promptly announced so all the people could hear, "Boss, can we finish this job soon? I'm starving, and you said we can't eat till we're done." I got a disapproving look from a woman on the elevator who said, "Feed the poor woman." I replied, "I want to,
but we just have one more floor to inspect."
The quicker we get done, the quicker she can eat." The woman sighed and said, "Well, then, let's get you where you are going." Quote. And I butted in mid-sentence with "to the mailroom." The woman pulled out her badge, swiped the receiver in the elevator, hit a few buttons, and said, "Let me drop you off on the way." Phew. Thankfully, due to Michelle's great observational skills and my quick movements, we had not been caught, and we even got a nice lady to badge us to that secure floor. And Michelle was only partially faking because, really, she is always hungry. On the floor with the mailroom, we got off the elevator and discovered that the mailroom door was unlocked.
There was a bell with a label that said,
"Ring for assistance." We rang it and waited. A woman came to the door and said, "How can I help you?" We spouted off our pretext about doing a quote and so on. The woman replied, "Well, I am going to have to call the security desk to get this approved." 26 Social engineering, the science of human hacking. Our story would have been blown if she had called security. So I said, "Well, you can if you want,
but Andrew is the one who sent us down here to get this done."
She said, "Oh, Andrew sent you? Then come on in." She led us into the mailroom and said, "Just don't touch the mail." We were rummaging through ceilings by
moving the ceiling tiles,
network cable, and endless amounts of mail.
As you can see throughout this story,
so much occurred because we made quick observations and cataloged that information for later use. And this was just the beginning. I didn't know I would need Andrew's name. Michelle didn't know we were going to meet a sympathetic woman on the elevator.
And neither of us knew we would meet a group of disinterested smokers who didn't care that we tailgated in.
But observations allowed us to use each of these for success. Scenario 2. You are tasked to spearfish a high-profile lawyer from a major American corporation. You're allowed to use any information you can find on her. This story will unfold more when we get to the technical OSINT section. But to pinpoint a very valuable lesson, let me tell you how I failed miserably on this one. Our OSINT led us to the fact that the lawyer handled some matters in Massachusetts. We discovered a recent tax law update in Massachusetts that might grab her interest and be very effective in getting her to click a link or open a malicious attachment. I began crafting an email about the changes in the state of Massachusetts and planned every aspect of this sphere.
The email was written professionally,
did not threaten,
included the payload we wanted,
gave a realistic deadline for reading and replying, and gave just enough detail to make sure she had to click to get more. Within minutes of sending the email,
we were caught and reported,
and the
campaign was totally blown.
Did you pick out the flaw from the preceding paragraph? I will give you a few seconds to go back and look before I tell you. Time's up. Massachusetts is not a state but a commonwealth. This lawyer, whose attention to detail was her strong suit, received an email about changes to the state of Massachusetts tax law and said to herself, "Hey, they should know Massachusetts is not a state but a commonwealth."
That caused her to look at the from address and
the URL, and to become suspicious enough that she reported it, and our cover was blown. We did not observe the little detail in this story, and that lack of observation cost us. Do you see what I see? 27. The lesson of this scenario is that you need to observe everything you can. Think like the person you are social engineering. Try to understand what they would expect to see, and deliver that. Otherwise, little details can come back to bite you. What can you do to teach yourself these skills? This topic is hard to cover in a short section in a book. Each person has natural ability as well as learned ability that can make learning these skills really easier.
Very difficult.
Because I don't know you personally, all I can do here is tell you what I did to try and enhance my skills. I would play a game that was along the lines of capture the flag. If I was entering a building, let's say a doctor's office, I would say to myself, the flags are to remember the first two people I see, what color shirts they are wearing, and what magazine they are reading or what they are doing. I would set some boundaries like these. They can't be the service-related folks behind the counter. I had to still go about my task of checking in and couldn't pause or deviate from that.
I couldn't write anything down.
Then I would enter the building, observe what I saw, and try my hardest to remember it until I left the building. It would go something like this. Older woman sitting to left in blue shirt reading Woman's Day magazine. Young child,
Male,
striped t-shirt, playing with blocks on the floor. I would make a note of each of these things in my mind and try my hardest to remember them. I used little memory tricks, such as saying something to myself a
couple times to try and embed it in my mind.
When I felt that I could make mental notes like this without having to think too
hard,
I would add some layers of complexity. Eventually, my flags list looked like this. Gender of X number of people, what they were wearing, what activities the people were engaged in when I first sighted them. Perceived communication profile. More on this in Chapter 3. Profiling people through communication. Body language tells.
28. Social engineering.
The science of human hacking. From this,
I would try to build a story in my head of why they were at the location I was at,
and use the details in the story to remember them. Honestly, this works so well, even with my bad memory, that I can remember one office I walked into 3 or 4 years ago where I saw 2 women in black skirts and white button-up tops reading something on an iPad. The woman on the left did not seem to like the woman on the right,
but she tolerated her, or she had
somewhere else to be. I could discern these things because the woman's hips were fully bladed away from the woman on the right. There was a man behind the counter with a security suit on. Black suit, white shirt, black tie. He had a gold watch on his right wrist, which indicated he was left-handed. His hair was neat,
and he had a well-trimmed beard.
He was writing on a notepad with a pen. He was observant of me as well as the lobby.
There was a young man waiting in chairs in front of the counter.
He was looking at a newspaper, but it appeared to me that he was faking reading. He was staring into space,
and the edges of the paper were shaking.
I fabricated a story that he was there for an interview and was nervous but was trying to look calm and distract
himself with a paper.
It is almost as if I can see that lobby now in my mind. These little observations
go a long way toward helping you achieve your goals as a social engineer.
My suggestion is to look for your own weaknesses, and then start small and build up. It is important to really get the point that you must practice.
Too often,
I see people wanting to achieve something 100% right away, but it takes time.
Failure can teach us way more than success if we let it.
Which is why I need to talk about expectations.
What should you expect to reap?
In the book Unmasking the Social Engineer, which I co-authored with Dr. Paul Ekman, I focus solely on nonverbal cues, body language and facial expressions. When I started learning how to first notice and then decipher these expressions, I felt like some kind of mind-reading superhero. I could look at a face and see emotions that the person was trying to hide. And then I blended that with body language and other actions to almost predetermine how they would
react to questions
or situations. The crazy part is that I found that my predictions were right more than 50% of the time. Therein began the problem. Let's say I was right 75% of the time. That means I was wrong 25%. In addition to that, it affected my perceived ability, and I felt that I could see more, understand more, and therefore see more than I really could. One of my motivations came from working with Dr. Eggman, who has corrected me time and time again.
He said,
"Chris, just because you can see the what doesn't mean you know the why. Before I discuss expectations, I feel it's important for you to hear this repeatedly. Just because you can see the what doesn't mean you automatically know the why. How can you make that connection between the what and the why? There are a few ways: questions,
more information,
and longer observation. Here's an example. I was teaching a class, and I was talking about a social engineering story from my experience. One student suddenly got an angry look on
his face.
His body language shifted from being open to closed. With arms folded, he leaned back in his chair and his legs jutted out. I perceived that he was not believing what I was saying, and I began to give him more personal attention. Doing so did not seem to fix his lack of belief, and he drew back. After a few minutes, he excused himself and left the class. I was dumbfounded. I did everything right. Why was he still mad at me? Shortly after that, we took a break.
I was walking toward the restroom,
thinking about this and how I could fix it. The student approached me and said, "Hey, I'm really sorry I left. My boss texted me in the middle of class and said we have an emergency at work." I tried to tell him I couldn't do anything because I was in class,
but he ordered me to leave and be on this ridiculous conference call.
"Can I make up the lesson I missed?" Quote, I literally started laughing, which I had to explain quickly, but I told him how I misinterpreted all that I saw. I could hear Dr. Eggman in my head. "Chris, what have I told you before? It was a great lesson for me in causality. The same is true about OSINT and observation. Don't assume that the things I am about to show you are all the results of the stupidity of humans. I prefer to think that people simply are uneducated to the potential dangers rather than being blatantly stupid."
Take a quick look at the picture in Figure 2-2.
And make a mental note of what you observe. Thinking like a social engineer, what do you see in this picture that could help you profile the driver of this car?
Figure 2-3 is a zoomed-in version that
might help. The right side has a breast cancer support sticker. The left contains a kid's wish. Network support sticker. Then there is a sticker that says 10 to 20 life. I had no clue what this was for, so I did a quick internet search and found that it is a sticker supporting stricter sentences for those who commit crimes using firearms. 30. Social engineering. The science of human hacking.
What do these stickers tell you about this person?
That they support charities, and which ones are important to them.
Could this be because they or a family
member suffered from cancer or childhood sickness? Also, they feel strongly about gun laws and gun crimes. Could this be because they were a victim or know a victim of gun crimes? Armed with these pieces of information, do you think could strike up an elicitation conversation? Be careful. Too many times I have students who will blurt out, "We will discuss gun laws and why they're wrong," or something to that effect. But think about how hard it would be to convert you from one belief to another during a conversation. This person will be no different. Blend that with your goal to have figure 2 to 2. What do you see? Figure 2 to 3. Is that easier to see? Do you see what I see? 31.
The target not thinking.
And remember that you want to converse about their interests, not yours. I explain more about this in Chapter 7. I didn't even ask you
for that when I discuss elicitation.
Now take a look at figure 2 to 4. What do you notice here? What could you observe as a social engineer? Think of the slight details in this one simple picture. You can see the type of work environment. You can see the operating system the person uses. You can notice what type of tablet the person has. You can see the person is a fan of a certain sitcom. Can you notice the browser they use and mail client?
2.
Do you notice a sign that might indicate some other details about the person? What other details can you pick out? This is just a cursory list. There may be much more that you picked out. Based on this, could you develop enough of a profile to work up 1 or 2 phishing emails that would trigger an emotional response?
Sometimes.
However, a picture or even an in-person interaction is not enough. This is where technical OSINT can bridge that gap. Figure 2 to 4. What can you tell from this picture?
32. Social engineering.
The science of human hacking. Technical open source intelligence.
Before you start writing a terrible review,
telling the world how bad I suck, because this chapter did not contain an all-inclusive list of every tool known to man for OSINTERs. Let me make something very clear. This chapter does not contain a full list of every tool, every process, and every method of collecting OSINT from technical means. Here is what I can tell you. This chapter touches on the tools and techniques I use every day in my business. There are some amazing minds out there in the OSINT world who you can delve miles deep with. Here are just a couple who I have been fortunate to come in contact with. Nick Furno. I flew to the UK to take Nick's 4-day course and was blown away. It is truly eye-opening what can be done with APIs and an
understanding of how social media applications work.
Nick's website is at www.csitech.co.uk. Michael Basil.
Michael is the man when it comes to disappearing
from the web, but he's also developed an amazing set of tools for OSINT practitioners that can help them dig into social media sites and other search engines. You can find his website at inteltechniques.com.
These fine chaps are both friends of mine,
and I have personally taken training, advice, and help from them. I can wholeheartedly say they are masters in the OSINT game. Shameless plug. They both have been guests on the Social Engineer podcast. Search for OSINT to find the episodes. My focus in the world of OSINT is on the daily practical uses for the work that I do, which can be broken out into 4 simple topics: social media, search engines, Google, and other tools. I will touch on each of these topics to give you a flavor of how I use them. and then you can use that knowledge as a foundation for further self-education. Social media. No chapter on OSINT would be complete without at least a cursory mention of the topic of social media. What is odd is that I can remember a time when reading your sister's diary would have resulted in multiple beatings. Now, personal diaries are not only online, but it's an insult if you don't read them. Comment on that. Social media is basically. Here are some statistics that will put this into order for us. According to We Are Social, https wearesocial.com/special-reports/digital-and-2017-global overview. As of January 2017, the world population was 7.476 billion. Internet users total 3.773 billion. There were 2.789 billion active social media users. There were 4.917 billion unique mobile users.
There were 2.549 billion active mobile social media users.
This is important for you, as a social engineer, to understand. Let's consider some of the top social media platforms. LinkedIn with over 106 million users. LinkedIn tells a person the following things: your job history, where you got your education, where you went to high school, clubs and academic achievements you're involved in, people who endorse your skills. Facebook with its more than 1.8 billion users. Facebook tells a person the following things: your favorite music, your favorite movies, clubs you belong to, your friends, your family, vacations you've taken, your favorite foods, places you've lived, much, much more. 34. Social engineering, the science of human hacking. Twitter with its 317 million users. Twitter tells a person the following things: what you are doing right now, your eating habits, your geolocation, your emotional state, within 280 characters. I could go on,
but you get the idea.
Just those 3 social media applications provide a ton of information for you to discover about your targets. I dare say you can build a pretty comprehensive profile on your target from this. Evaluating a person based on social media should not be confused with developing an actual psychological profile. As the fun fact mentions, there are people who communicate one way online and another in person. Even though that is true,
social media is still valuable for a social engineer because many attacks occur
based on the online personality, and learning how to communicate with that aspect of the target can lead to a breach. with hundreds of social media platforms and billions of people using them. Social media is a treasure trove of data for social engineers. One of the best ways to rip information from social media platforms is by using search engines, which is the topic of the next section. Search engines. The internet is constantly changing,
including new and improved ways of finding information in its yottabytes of cached data.
Those constant changes can be a strength for most people, but they can also become a weakness for social engineers, because a search engine that works today may not work tomorrow. I remember when Spokeo first came out. I used it almost daily. It was an amazing source of great information.
As its popularity grew,
so did a number of ads. Fun fact, on episode 87 of the Social Engineer podcast, we talked to Dr. James Pennebaker. He wrote a tool,
www.analyzewords.com,
that can analyze a person's Twitter account based on the language used. We ran Michelle's Twitter account at Sultry Asian through this tool, and she was evaluated as the Spacey Valley girl with an upbeat, in-the-moment style. Honestly,
I almost spewed water when I read that because it's the opposite of
Michelle in real life, but it's exactly how she wanted to be viewed over social media. Do you see what I see? 35. Then came the request to pay for information, and then information that was not as reliable seemed to pop up all too often. Now,
I'm not saying that Spokeo has nothing useful,
but as a professional social engineer, my time is money, and if I must use another source to verify every fact I get, it can cost me a job. In my first book, and many subsequent books after, I have found that including lists of tools is kind of useless to the reader. A few things often occur the day the book is released. The tools are outdated and the ideas I gave the readers are old. New and better tools come along. A combination of the first two things. Instead of giving you a list of websites and tools, I want to walk you through performing OSINT on a target.
Yes,
I will mention websites and tools that I use, but the focus will be more on how to think through this aspect of being a social engineer. Our target is my good friend and Nick Furneaux. Let's hope he stays my good friend after this book comes out. It should be noted, there is no ill will toward Nick. I'm merely using him to show that even for a very aware, very alert, and very security-conscious person,
the internet holds secrets for those who know
how to ask. D0ing the Furneaux. So, what does it mean to D0x someone?
The word D0x is a hacker term that means
to work up a document on a target containing details about the target's personal life. Those details are often used to further attack the target, humiliate them, or perpetrate other crimes. None of those are the goals here. I'm just showing you the power of OSINT and how it can be used. Often, I start at the doors of people.com. People, pronounced people, is the site I describe as what would happen if the white pages and social media scraped sites and had a baby. What is great about this site is that you can search for a name, a username, a nickname, or other details you may have about your target. Just looking at the web quickly tells us that Nick's Twitter account is NickFX. Let's social media. It was an amazing source of great information.
As its popularity grew,
so did a number of ads. Fun fact, on episode 87 of the Social Engineer podcast, we talked to Dr. James Pennebaker. He wrote a tool,
www.analyzewords.com,
that can analyze a person's Twitter account based on the language used. We ran Michelle's Twitter account at Salt.
I'm not saying that Spokeo has nothing useful,
but as a professional social engineer, the readers are old, new and better tools come along. A combination of the first two things. Instead of giving you a list of websites and tools, I want to walk you through performing OSINT on a target. Yes, I will mention websites and tools that I use, but the focus will be more on how to think through this aspect of being a social engineer. Our target is my good friend and Nick Furneaux. Let's hope he stays my good friend after this book comes out. It should be noted, there is no ill will toward Nick. I'm merely using him to show that even for a very aware, very alert, and very security-conscious person, the internet holds secrets for those who know how to ask. D0xing the Furneaux. So, what does it mean to D0x someone? The word D0x is a hacker term that means to work up the document on a target containing details about the target's personal life. Those details are often used to further attack the target, humiliate them, or perpetrate other crimes. None of those are the goals here. I'm just showing you the power of OSINT and how it can be used. Often, I start at the doors of people.com. People, pronounced people, is a site I describe as what would happen if the white pages and social media scraped sites and had a baby. What is great about this site is that you can search for a name, a username, a nickname, or other details you may have about your target. Just looking at the web quickly tells us that Nick's Twitter account is NickFX. Let's see what we can find by using people.com with that nickname. Take a look at figure 2 to 5. 36 Social Engineering, the science of human hacking. With just a quick glance, we can see the first picture brought up the right Nick. And only 4 lines down, we see Nick Furneaux associated with Chris H. I wonder who that is, and a whole username. Before we get to that, let's see what happens when I click the picture that we know to be Nick. The result is shown in figure 2 to 6. With one simple click, we can see confirmation that we have the right guy as well as his location, OSINT. We know where he lives. Now, back up one page in the results, and click that 4th link down. What does that reveal? Take a look at figure 2 to 7. We have some great OSINT here, don't we? A Facebook page and a hobby we didn't previously know that Nick had. He is a snowboarder, and he must really like that Chris H character. He seems to be everywhere. When I click the Facebook link, I'm greeted with even more OSINT. He lives in Bristol, UK. I can see a list of friends. I found a new username, NickFurneaux.1. Figure 2 to 5. Do you see him? Do you see what I see? 37. Figure 2 to 6 confirmation. Figure 2 to 7 more OSINT. 38 Social Engineering, the science of human hacking. When I head back to people.com and enter just his name and his known location of Bristol, England, I get even more details about him. Previous employment, LinkedIn profile, yet another username, where he went to school. With a handful of clicks, I have a decent amount of information on Nick that would definitely be useful in developing a profile on him. Can I get more information? Next, I jump over to a site called webme.com. The whole goal of WebMII is to help you see people's online visibility. Running a search therefore, Nick Furneaux returns the results you see in figure 2 to 8. Right away, I notice a few things. Nick's visibility score is 4.22. Which isn't that high, because it's out of 10. But clicking on that shows us when in time he was most visible. See figure 2 to 9. As an OSINTER, the times when Nick was most popular would pique my interest. I want to find out what was going on in his life at those times. Going back to the image shown in figure 2 to 8, there are some other pieces of data to be gleaned. The first image links to Twitter. The third image links to a podcast where Nick was interviewed. It is the Social Engineer podcast, and I hear it is really amazing. Another shameless plug. Many of the other images link to Canadian LinkedIn pages that don't pertain to the Nick for No we're interested in. The fifth image is weird.
A young man in some kind of animal onesie.
What is that?
Clicking that fifth link takes me to a music video made by a company
called AFB Productions. When I click the More button, I see what's shown in figure 2 to 10. The video appears to have been made by a chap named Toby Furneaux. Same last name.
And the driver in the video is none other than Nick Furneaux.
Of course. This discovery opens another rabbit hole of digging into who this Toby is and what AFB is all about. It doesn't take long,
just 2 or 3 clicks,
to realize that Toby is Nick's son, and he runs a small production company called Any Future Box, AFB. A good OSINTR and great resources for attack vectors. Refer to figure 2 to 8 again.
That picture of Nick has been in a few places that I
stumbled upon. This picture might lead to more resources, so I grabbed the actual figure 2 to 8. A lot more info on Nick. Figure 2 to 9. When was Nick popular?
40 Social Engineering.
The Science of Human Hacking. URL of that picture and load it into a reverse image search, which you can do by following these steps. 1. Right-click on the image. 2. Click View the image. 3. Right-click again, and then click Copy Image Location. Figure 2 to 10. Even more OSINT. Do you see what I see? 41. 4. Go to www.google.com and click Images. 5. Click Paste Image by URL.
And paste in the URL of the image that you
copied. In step 3, you should see a page that looks like figure 2 to 11.
In addition to seeing that he uses this same headshot a lot,
I uncovered that Nick has a blogspot page and wrote on a forensic speech too. When I follow the link, figure 2 to 11, that's a whole lot of Nick. 42. Social Engineering. The Science of Human Hacking. For the forensics page,
I find an interview of Nick from a few years ago.
And that interview ends with his email and his website URL. When I do a quick WHOIS lookup of Nick's website domain name, it reveals what you see in figure 2 to 12. Nick has had this website for a long time,
and it's not expiring anytime soon.
Interestingly
and intelligently,
Nick has his domain privatized. That means there is no info on the record,
just his company name,
which we already know, and that he is an individual in the UK. The type of information gathering I just walked you through is very common in the world of a social engineer. Think about why this is so. With very few clicks,
I was able to uncover quite a bit of useful information on a target.
Figure 2 to 12 was you?
OSINT fact.
There are multiple ways to perform a WHOIS lookup. If you use Linux or Mac, you can do it right from the terminal by typing whois domain, replacing domain with the actual domain, or you can use a free website. There are several to choose from, but
the one I use most often is http
www.whois.net. You see what I see. 43. Granted, I didn't find a link to all of Nick's passwords or his private photos. Thank God for that, but I did find enough information to really help if I wanted to. Attack Nick with a phishing or vishing attack. Is that it, though? Absolutely not. Entering the ring as the heavyweight champion of the world when it comes to OSINT. Enter the Google. The word alone should make a social engineer giggle with happiness. Okay, that mental picture is pretty disturbing. So maybe put the idea of giggling
aside and think of it more like a silent smirk of knowledge-filled happiness.
Why?
Google is like an all-knowing oracle.
She knows all the things you ever did, stores them, and even caches them if you try to delete them. You know.
4.
Safekeeping. With all this power
and trillions of indexed web pages,
how can one little old social engineer find the tiny bits of data he or she needs? Before I can answer that, I need to give you a quick explanation of how Google, or any search engine, really works. Search engine mysteries revealed. There really is no mystery revealed in this section. The title is misleading. You probably already understand how search engines work, but on the off chance that you don't, here's a very quick and easy explanation of it. Search engines use little pieces of code called spiders. Spiders crawl, I don't make this stuff up, through every web page on the open web and cache what they are allowed to access. There are certain files, like robots.txt, that stop a spider from indexing certain areas, but most other areas are indexed and cached. That cache is put into a database, which, when you enter a search term in the search box, provides results like you see in Figure 2 to 13.
Let me point out a few key things in Figure 2 to 13.
First, the search returned 105,000 results in 0.59 seconds. How can it search 30 trillion web pages in 0.59 seconds? Remember, these pages have been cached in a database, which allows for blazing fast speeds in searching.
Google facts. Google is powerful.
It owns about 88% of market share in search advertising. According to Google,
the search engine has indexed more than 100 million gigabytes of websites.
www.google.com/search/how search works/crawling-indexing. 44. Social engineering. The science of human hacking. Scraping 105,000 web pages would be not only improbable but most likely impossible.
So,
let me tell you about operators.
Enter the operators.
Google has created a set of search terms called operators that limit what Google looks for. Think of it as being the difference between using a magnifying glass and a microscope. Both get you closer to an object you want to inspect, but if you really
want to home in on the details,
a microscope is the way to go. These operators are the microscope of searching. The following two websites list all the useful operators for Google, and even some for Yahoo and Bing.
https
support.google.com/websearch/answer/2466433 HL equals N and ref underscore topic equals 3,081,620 www.google-guide.com/advanced_operators_reference.html. For your convenience, here's a list of the operators I find the most useful. In text, this operator searches for whatever follows it in the text of the web page or document being searched. For example, if you type in text CSI Tech, Google searches for all occurrences of that phrase. Site. This operator limits your search terms to the site you list for. Example, if you type site csitech.co.uk, Google searches only that domain and nothing outside of it. A NURL. This operator may sound similar to the site operator,
but it limits
your search to any URL that contains the search term you type. If you
type a NURL
csitech.co.uk, the search would also include any website that has the term ccisTech.co.uk in its URL. For example, if there was a site called forensicsmag.com/csitech.co.uk/interviews, it would be returned on this search but not in the search with the site operator.
File type.
This operator does exactly what it sounds like. It limits your search to the file type you choose. Cache. This operator searches for the cached version of the domain, file, or other artifact you list. Info.
This operator gives you info on the domain you list here.
Like most things involving software,
there are rules.
Google searching is no different. The search term follows the operator, a colon, and no space. If you search for site whitehouse.gov, for example, you limit your search to whitehouse.gov, but if you search for site whitehouse.gov, You limit your search to the space after the colon, which is ineffective. You can use a hyphen, dash, before an operator to remove those results from your search. For example, if you know you want to find all CSI Tech references but don't want any in the .com space, you can try this search to limit your results.
In Neuro,
csitech.co.uk-site.com. If you have a search term that is more than one word,
and you want all
of the words included in the search, you must use quotation marks. For example,
if I want to search for Nick Furneaux, I could try in text
Nick Furneaux to include both first and last names in my in-text search. According to Google, https
support.google.com/gsa/
answer 4,411,411 hashtag requests.
There is a limit to the number of search terms
allowed. The default is 50, and the upper limit is 150. But honestly, if you are searching with upward of 100 search terms, you might need help. Believe me, there are a lot more search terms and other goodies than what I listed here. Google is a powerful tool,
and I could spend volumes delving into every
little corner of it, but we need to get back to our OSINT. Let's work through some examples and see what we can find. Limiting for the win. When I interrupted my search for info about Nick Furneaux earlier in this chapter, I was on my way to creating a nice little profile about him. Can Google either reconfirm my findings or give even more information? 46. Social engineering. The science of human hacking. I had found some information like his name and a nickname he uses on at least one social media outlet. What if I search for those two together to see what could be found? Typing in text Nick Furneaux in text Nick FX into the Google search box will result in what's shown in figure 2 to 14. Figure 2, 140 to 206 in 0.82 seconds flat. Do you see what I see? 47. In less than 1 second, I have a solid 206 results on the target. One of the features of searching on Google is being able to see images related to your search. Clicking the More Images for link can show you some interesting results.
In this
case, the images can take me to pages that talk about Nick.
But I already know a lot of this information about Nick.
So let's see what else I can find. I changed the search term to in text Nick Furneaux in text UK. The results are shown in figure 2 to 15. Figure 2 to 15. Are we getting warm yet? Nick. 48. Social engineering. The science of human hacking. The first result tells me he is training in a town called Bristol.
The last result
provides the name of the company that Nick might still be part, as well as his full
date of birth and even an address in,
you guessed it, Bristol. The page also includes a list of family or friends that he might be working with at that company. It's a treasure trove of information. Changing the UK in the previous search to Bristol will lead us to information such as his postal code and even some names of other family members that might be living with him. Here's one last example before I move on. What do you think would be the first result if you performed the following Google search? In text, Nick Furneaux, site, linkedin.com. In text, Bristol. The first result I got when I did this search was Nick's LinkedIn page. Using the Google operators, you can add little bits of information you get from your previous searches to keep homing in until you find the exact piece you need. I want to show you more about the power of Google, but since Nick is still my friend, or at least he was the last time I checked, I'm going to move the focus away from him and on to general searches. But it says private right in the title. Have you heard of RSA private keys? An RSA key is a key that is based on a proprietary algorithm. It comes in two parts: the public key, which helps identify it, and the private key, which unlocks the kingdom. According to this definition, RSA private keys are used to establish a secure connection.
So,
You would think that if you searched for RSA private keys, you would find none, right? But using the following search, begin.
certificate DSA, RSA.
File type, key, gives you more than 3,000 results, as shown in figure 2 to 16. Figure 2 to 16, why did you call it private? Do you see what I see? 49.
But it's marked confidential.
Often, government entities mark documents with certain classifications to indicate whether the general public should see them. Markings like classified and top secret usually indicate that the documents aren't for general consumption. You would assume that you can't find any of those online.
You know
What they say about people who assume.
but since I like living life outside prison walls,
Let's say we just want to see if there are any documents with passwords.
which should be confidential.
Right. What if I searched for site gov.ir in text, password file type XLS? This should limit my search to any gov.ir domain and look for only XLS files with a word password in them. The results are shown in figure 2 to 17.
That doesn't seem right. Why would a document in an Iraqi government
server have the English word password in it? But what if I use the translate google.com site to translate the word password into Persian? Does it help? Figure 2 to 18 shows the result.
Figure 2 to 17, what went wrong?
Figure 2 to 18 multilingual Google searches. 50 social engineering, the science of human hacking. The power of Google is truly shown here. I didn't need to know Persian or even search in Persian.
I just had to tell it to look for that word.
And I was able to find documents, webcams. It's time to stop dancing in your underwear. There was a boom in the desire for people to have webcams hooked up in their
Homes.
people use them for monitoring their children, babysitters, and pets, for security, and more. Many of these cameras were sold with default settings that left them vulnerable and wide open. Sometimes the software sold with the cameras also left a lot to be desired. Easy for the user, yes,
but also easy for attackers.
One such software was Webcam XP, as indicated by its name. It was made to run on Windows XP, Vista, 7, 8, 9, 10, Server 2003, 2008, and 2012. According to its website, the software's last update was in 2016. With that in mind, it should not be too popular today, so you would imagine that searching for these now would not give you too much. Right. So, I searched for InTitle.
Webcam 7 Neural 8080 in text.
8080, and figure 2 to 19 shows the result. Granted, many of these webcams are intended to be online and are meant for the public to see. They're streaming traffic scenes or waterfronts and other areas. But there are people who set up webcams for personal use and leave them open in their yards or homes.
The point is that if these webcams are not properly secured,
any person with a little skill may be watching you, and you won't even know. Other sources of intel. Usually when I get to this point,
people react with a mixture of horror and curiosity about what else you can turn up with a Google search.
I don't want to list every Google search I have done,
but I can tell you some of the things that I have
easily uncovered using only Google searches. A webcam of some guy watching his marijuana plants grow. People's private photos from their phones. People's shared music and movie directories. Documents containing full passwords, dates of birth, and social security numbers. Thousands of credit cards.
Two. Fully open SQL databases loaded with info.
Open access to traffic cams. Open access to power grids and control systems.
A number of child pornography drop spots.
The list can go on and on. Figure 2 to 19 webcams galore. 52 social engineering. The science of human hacking. 2 other things. This section alone could be its own book. But before I move on and wrap up this chapter, I would be remiss if I didn't mention 2 other things. Robots are cool. When I was a kid, I wanted a robot so bad. I thought R2-D2 would be my best friend, if I could get one. In this case, I'm not talking about that type of robots. I'm referring to robots.txt files. What is a robots.txt file? It's a file that website owners use to tell the spiders, or robots that crawl and scrape the sites, what is and isn't allowable. For example, it's not uncommon to see disallow statements in a robots.txt file, which indicates that robots aren't allowed to cache that folder. For example, figure 2 to 20 is the robots.txt file for whitehouse.gov. Now think like a social engineer for a second. What does the file in figure 2 to 20 tell you? You can see what directories exist, but you can also see which directories they don't want you to access,
or that they don't want Google to cache.
In addition, files like MySQL or PGPSQL give indicators of the type of tech used on the site and its creation. Now, if this was an actual target, which it is not, I repeat,
it is not,
we would go to each of those directories to make sure it was appropriately configured and not allowing us in without authorization.
We would check out those logs and files,
if they're accessible, to see if there was anything misconfigured in the servers. I once did a job for a medium-sized company. It was the rare do all you can do, and see what you can find, then attack us with no gloves on type of test. I started with a bit of OSINT and some Google searching, and I found in their robots.txt file that they had a disallow statement on a directory called admin. Just to check it,
I typed www.company.com/admin.
And to my shock, I was let in with no credentials. The directory contained the CEO's private file repository, and it appeared that he used this to share files he would need when traveling. It contained included contracts, banking data, a picture of his passport, and numerous other sensitive details. I found a contract that had been signed within the past couple of days. I bought a domain that was 1 or 2 characters off of the real company name, set up an email for the person who signed the contract, and fished the CEO with a malicious file and an email that stated, I am not sure if I replied with a fully signed contract, but there is a question on section 14.1. Can you please see it inside and let me know? Quote, do you see what I see? 53. Figure 2 to 20. That's a lot of disallowance. 54. Social engineering.
The science of human hacking. Within 15 minutes,
the CEO had the email, opened it, and was compromised. He was then emailing the fake address, saying that the contract would not open, and it just kept crashing. The penetration test, aka pen test, which was supposed to take a week, was over in about 3 hours. I called the CEO, and our conversation went something like this. CEO, hello, me. Hey, Paul, this is Chris over at Social Engineer. I wanted to talk to you about the pen test. CEO, ha, giving up so soon. Chris, I knew we were a hard nut to crack. Me, well, Paul, we already have your passport, date of birth,
credit cards,
access to your banks, and a remote shell with admin credentials on the network.
I thought I should call and see if you really want me to continue for the week.
CEO, come on, you're making this up. It just started a couple hours ago. Tell me, who is the loser that clicked and gave shell? I want words with him. Me, well, Paul.
I gulped hard.
Not sure if I could make the joke that was in my head. I wouldn't go too harsh on him. He is a pretty cool guy. CEO. Oh yeah? Who? Me. Paul. It's you. I then explained every detail to him, and he realized quickly what had occurred. This particular pen test was won largely due to a robots.txt file and a misconfigured directory. It's all about the meta, baby. According to the Oxford Dictionary, meta is defined as referring to itself or to the
conventions of its genre.
Self-referential. So, metadata is literally data about data. Very Inception-esque. No, let me explain it more simply. Metadata is information about an artifact that you find in a search. Many times, that data provides some pretty interesting facts.
Many that might not have been put there intentionally.
Let's say I do a very benign Google search to find out doc files that contain information about passwords. I come upon this little document called Final Password Policy. What will the metadata reveal? Take a look at figure 2 to 21. Do you see what I see? 55. This metadata gives us the date and time it was made.
The last person who saved
it, the author's name, title, how many revisions the file has been through, and some other information I'm not mentioning here. You might be thinking, so what? Quote, well, just the name and the type of document that something is can be huge pieces of intel for a social engineer. Think of this. What if a social engineer were to find a new HR policy you just released? The metadata reveals when the policy was last revised. In this case, it wasn't even a month old. Who wrote it, and when it was released? Of course, the policy info is in the document, too. Do you think a phishing email that seems to come from the person who wrote the policy and seemingly includes an update to the policy would get a few clicks? Have a look at figure 2 to 22. At first,
you again might be thinking,
okay,
so,
are we gonna fish this guy with a coupon for hot sauce? No, but take a look at the metadata, which is shown in figure 2 to 23. When you find a seemingly innocuous photo online, the metadata gives you
information on the type of camera,
the date, the time, and the GPS coordinates of where it was taken.
Which just happens to be a
pretty large user of that brand of hot sauce. So, a guy used his smartphone to take a picture. His smartphone had GPS turned on and did not block the camera app from embedding all that metadata in the back end of the photo file.
When he uploaded the picture to his social media,
the file contained all this information, so it was also released to the world. Figure 2 to 23. The answer is figure 2 to 22. No. Really. What's a meta view? Quote, do you see what I see? 57. Can you see the implications yet? Imagine it's not your buddy you're eating dinner with, but one of the following. The CEO of a large utility company who is being targeted by a nation-state attack. The secretary of a billionaire who has information on his banks and transfer authority. Your 15-year-old daughter taking naughty pictures of herself. Now can you see the implications? No matter which scenario you thought of, this easily accessible information gets dangerous quickly. I worked one job with my team in which we had been tasked to perform OSINT and then attack a high-level target in the defense space. The goal was not to compromise the man, but to test his level of willingness to take an action he should not take. For educational purposes, we were to record any calls made and any click-throughs. OSINT led us to his social media pages. We had paid dirt when we found out he was a prolific tweeter,
and he loved to use his brand new iPhone with GPS.
Figure 2 to 24, that's pretty saucy, if you ask me. 58. Social engineering, the science of human hacking, turned on.
Why is this so important? Twitter allowed us to graph out his location
throughout the day as he tweeted from every location he went to. In a matter of a few hours, we knew the following things. His favorite place to stop for coffee every morning, the gym he went to before he went home, 2 of his favorite restaurants, his home address, how much he hated city traffic. There was much more OSINT,
but the info in the preceding list came to be crucial in our attacks. First,
we found a domain that was basically one letter different from his gym's domain. We set up a quick email that told him we were updating all accounts, and his credit card info was no longer valid. We asked him to log into enter his credit card info now, which prompted him to click through very quickly. Knowing the page was going to 404 out, we waited until we saw the click, and then we called him on the phone. The conversation went something like this. Caller: hello, is this Mr. Smith? Quote, target: yes, it is.
Who is this?
Caller: this is Sarah over at Cold's Gym.
We sent an email out earlier today about our system upgrade.
Well, the email had a bad URL, so we are calling our customers to apologize. I can send you out a new link or take your credit card and update it for you. What is easier for you? Target: no problem, Sarah.
Here is my card number.
Caller: thank you, Mr. Smith. See you tonight. This attack worked because it hit topics familiar to him,
and it was believable.
With just a little OSINT, one fish, and one call, we had a click,
a credit card
number, and the other 5 vectors prepared in case we needed them. Metadata is powerful and very useful to a social engineer, so I suggest that you make sure to check it on every file you obtain during OSINT. This can be daunting, especially when you're dealing with a large number of files. I personally like to use tools like Foca,
www.11paths.com/labstools/
Foca/index.html, and Maltego, www.paterva.com/web7, to make this job easier. Do you see what I see? 59. Although I promise to not get too deep into any tools in this book,
I feel it is
imperative to at least briefly cover these and 2 other useful tools, which I will
do in the next section.
Tools of the trade.
As I say in Chapter 1, I decided not to focus too much on tools in this book,
because tools change often. However, there are 4 tools that have remained in my tool chest for the last 5 to 10 years, and I felt it would be wrong of me to not even mention them. Although these tools have stayed around for a long time, they'd have had interface and functionality changes. If I were to spend a ton of time going through each feature, the information would be outdated by the time you get this book.
Instead,
I will point you to the tools websites where you can get tutorials and keep abreast of the latest and greatest developments. I promise, this tour will be quick, but it's an essential piece of the puzzle you won't want to miss. Set. I can remember chatting with my good friend David Kennedy. I was telling him about my desire to have a tool that allowed me to fish someone and automatically
feed them a payload, grab credentials, or clone any web page.
Dave's response was, "I think I can do that." Not even a full 24 hours later, he had a prototype. From that moment on, Dave ran with what was called SET, or the Social Engineer's Toolkit, like it was a life's mission. He issues updates all the time. It seems like every day, and he has built-in features that make my original little ideas seem really lame. It's an amazing tool that has over 2 million downloads. You can get the tool as well as instructions from www.trustedsec.com/socialengineer-toolkit. Intel techniques. Okay, this one is not really a tool per se as much as it's a collection of amazing search engines that my good friend Michael Basil has put together. 60 Social Engineering, the science of human hacking. Michael is an expert at a few things,
but there are 2 of them that he truly eats,
breathes, and sleeps. Finding people on the internet and hiding from people who
are looking for you on the internet.
Honestly, once Michael told me that to buy things from Amazon, I should set up a dummy company in Mexico, so I can get credit cards that don't tie back to me.
Michael has set up an amazing collection of tools that search everything from
social media, phone numbers, IP addresses, and even reverse images. You can find
these tools at
https://inteltechniques.com/menu.html. And I suggest you spend some consideration. FOCA.
FOCA stands for Fingerprinting Organizations with Collected Archives.
Way back at DEF CON 18 in 2010, a small group of Brazilian hackers released the tool and took the internet by storm. To date, there is nothing else like FOCA in the world. It's a Windows-only tool that has gone through some serious ups and downs over the years. At one point, I stopped using it because there had been no updates for some time, and there was no way to contact any person running it, and the tool was in open source.
Then the folks at 11 Paths took over the project.
They did an update and released it on their website at https://labstools/foca/index.html. Sadly, FOCA is still Windows only, but if you're not on Windows, it's worth setting up a virtual machine. The speed at which FOCA grabs files and rips out useful metadata is amazing. Check it out, Maltego, the granddaddy of them all. At the risk of sounding like an infomercial for Maltego, I love this tool, I really do. The folks at Paterva do something you rarely see.
They make an amazing tool.
Release a smaller free version that is just as amazing, and keep the commercial
version updated,
so it's always moving forward and very usable. What is Maltego, you ask? It is a tool that helps you collect data from online sources and then gives you an interactive graph to display it.
It can help you catalog,
footprint, investigate, and make connections with public sources of intelligence. Maltego makes my work much easier than it would otherwise be, and the tool is easy and fun to use. In addition, the guys at Poterva, the company that makes Do You See What I See? 61
Maltego,
offer amazing training videos and courses. Finally, Maltego is made for every platform. You can check it out and download it right from the Poterva website at
poterva.com/web7/downloads.php #tab-2.
I suggest you start with Maltego Classic. Summary: knowledge is certainly power, and there may be no better source of knowledge of your targets than OSINT. If you follow the principles in this chapter, practice, and hone those skills, you can become a master in finding even the minute details hidden all over the internet.
You have done all the OSINT.
You have cataloged, collected, and documented every piece articulately. You think you have found the piece that will be your
vector,
and you need to start preparing your pretext. How will analyzing the data you found and looking for key indicators about the target's communication style help?
That is the topic of the next chapter.